If you want to win your fantasy league this year, you need to be drafting the right running backs. And in this video, we're going to be breaking down 5 guys that I would personally bet my house on this year. Now that sounds crazy, but these guys have the right volume, talent, and situation to take you to a fantasy championship. And if you skip out on these guys on draft day, you might just regret it. Now I'm Sal Vetri. I've helped over 10,000 people last year alone win their fantasy leagues. And now it's time to do the same in this video for you. And we're going to start in Green Bay with somebody who the second half of last year, yeah, you could have bet everything you owned on Josh Jacobs and he was going to deliver a touchdown for you because he did every single week and 80 plus yards and actually a nice fantasy finish. And heading into this year, it's not like he's being priced as he's like a first round pick. That would be way too high. He's being priced properly at the end of the second, top of the third round. And honestly, I'm completely fine paying that price for a guy last year who quietly had 16 touchdowns after not scoring the first month of the season, was number 8 in fantasy points per game, putting up 17.2 points per game. And this was basically in a Packers offense that was not functional for like half the year. Jordan Love gets hurt at the end of week 1. They have to bring Malik Willis in for a couple of weeks. And then Jordan Love is banged up mid-season, right? They weren't fully healthy really half the season. But despite Jordan Love being banged up for a chunk of the season, Josh Jacobs was still able to total the 5th most red zone touches, the 6th most rushing yards, the 4th most touchdowns, and the 2nd most yards created in the NFL. And it actually should have been even better for Josh Jacobs because he was arguably the most unlucky running back in the NFL. When you look at this last year, he led the NFL last year with a league-high 94 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns negated by penalties. We just showed you earlier that this guy had 16 touchdowns last year. Based on the volume he was getting and some unlucky just calls on the penalties, he was actually expected to score over 19 touchdowns. So maybe even a world where Jacobs was, actually unlucky. But now here's where things get really interesting because once Jordan Love came back middle of the season for the Packers from that injury and he was still a little bit wonky, but he started to get his legs under him from week 7 to 18, Josh Jacobs was producing as arguably a top 3 fantasy running back in the NFL. He was scoring touchdowns every single week. You could see right here on RotoViz, averaging 20.5 fantasy points per game, PPR, in between his receiving yards of 22 and his rushing yards of 78 or so. He was averaging over 100 total yards per game, about 20 touches per game. He was a top 5 running back. He scored a touchdown in 10 out of 11 games down the stretch. And the dude had 20 or more fantasy points in 9 of those 11 games, the only running back to say that he did that. He looked like the engine of this Packers offense. I mean, he was the second half of last year, and heading into this year, it seems like he'll be doing the exact same thing. Because remember, the Packers have one of the youngest teams in the NFL. In this offseason, in terms of free agency, really not much has changed here. If anything, A.J. Dillon is gone, who was out all of last year. They bring in a guard in Aaron Banks and McCole Hardman. These are just some depth pieces in terms of Hardman. And in the NFL draft, they don't add a running back. They had a first-round wide receiver in Matthew Golden. Anthony Belton in the second round is another big pick that they ended up taking that could help Josh Jacobs. But in terms of the backfield, it's basically rinse and repeat of last year. Emmanuel Wilson and Christopher Brooks, who have their moments as backups, and Marshawn Lloyd, who will be returning from an injury that kept him out for most of his rookie year, but we really don't know what to expect from Lloyd. Now, if you're playing in best ball drafts or leagues where it goes 18 to 20 rounds, these crazy leagues, Marshawn Lloyd is like a last round pick. Makes some sense because they invested a 3rd round pick in him last year. He could be a 3rd down back. He could take over as if Josh Jacobs misses time. But if we're talking about Josh Jacobs' outlook, an unproven, basically rookie in Marshawn Lloyd, and then these guys right here who he competed with last year, I'm not too concerned about that. Sure, Josh Jacobs is now never probably going to be a guy who sees 80% of his snaps. Very few running backs in the NFL are, but I'm pretty sure he's going to see 60 to 65% pretty easily. And last year was just one season where Jacobs was productive. It's not like it was the only season. This is just kind of something that he's been doing in the NFL recently. He's been a top 15 running back in 4 of the last 6 seasons with 260 touches in all but one of those, and he has at least 1,300 total yards in 4 of his last 6 years. So even though in his final year with the Raiders behind a bad offensive line and he was a little bit banged up, especially at the end of the year where he missed time, outside of that year, he's basically been a lock-it-in top 15 back. And all the sports books, this is courtesy of DraftKings right here. You can see DraftKings, they believe that he's going to do it yet again. He's currently projected to have over 1,000 rushing yards. His prop for rushing touchdowns is 9.5. So basically, Josh Jacobs, not even factoring in his receiving production, which will be there, is hovering around 1,100 rushing yards, hovering around 10 rushing touchdowns. That alone is better than guys that are going at or ahead of him in fantasy drafts right now. Some of those guys going at or ahead of him are names like Bucky Irving, are names like Jonathan Taylor, are names who are going slightly below him like Chase Brown. The rushing overall totals and the touchdowns combined, Josh Jacobs has a higher total there. He's going at the end of the second round, the 23rd overall pick, sometimes drops to the beginning of the 3rd round. I mean, if you have a draft where let's just say you can go at the top of your draft and get out there with a Jamar Chase, a Bijan Robinson, and come back around and snag like an A.J. Brown, a Ladd McConkey, or a Josh Jacobs, that feels very strong. And it also feels strong when you go into that 6th and 7th round of your draft and you can land this rookie running back who I believe is going massively underrated right now. Obviously, everybody's talking about Ashton Jeanty. Amarian Hampton is also a first-round pick. RJ Harvey's getting a lot of buzz, and for good reason, but the guy who's flying under the radar right now is Caleb Johnson. Caleb Johnson, who last year alone in college was one of the most dominant running backs in a good conference in the Big Ten. He put up over 1,500 rushing yards, which is crazy because the year before didn't even have 500. You scroll over, 23 touchdowns. He improves from just catching 4 and 3 passes, so 7 total passes his first 2 college seasons, in collegiate seasons, to then having 22 receptions. He said he wanted to work on his game, a 10% target share, massive spikes here. During this time, he ended up averaging 6.4 yards per carry. He had over 1,700 total yards, a massive increase in the most improved running back in college football from his 2023 season to his 2024 season. And I mean, the dude just has prototypical size, which is going to fit perfectly with what Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator for the Steelers, wants to do with his running backs in this running game. He's 6 foot, 224 pounds. You scroll over to his athletic testing, it's not going to look like anything crazy. The dude ran a 4.57, but a 4.57 at 220 plus pounds is still 75th percentile, top 25% speed, so well above average. He actually hit 22 miles per hour in game speed in college, which is amongst the top 10% of college running backs. So this guy has sneaky long speed as well as the elite NFL size. And as you can see on the team changes tracker, courtesy of the Fantasy Blueprint, you can check out the Fantasy Blueprint, all my drafting tools, in-season tools, ability to ask me questions as well at jointheblueprint.com. The pricing does go up at the beginning of August pretty significantly. You can see right here, well, they added Caleb Johnson in the 3rd round. They didn't have a 2nd round pick. Their 1st round pick was spent on defense. That's basically all they did in the draft. But in terms of subtractions, the big one, as you can see pointing to right here with the arrow, Najee Harris is leaving this backfield, which opens up between his targets and his rushing attempts from last year about 300 total opportunities. And when you look at what's left in this backfield, they signed Kenneth Gainwell. Okay, they end up bringing back, well, restricted free agent, so he was still there, Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren is, I would say, like a satellite plus back. He's mostly known as a pass catcher. He can be inefficient, he can be efficient, especially outside the tackles, but he's often hurt when he's running inside the tackles. If you're looking at who's more likely to be the goal line back, probably the 225-pound running back who did it in college, as opposed to the 205-pound back Jaylen Warren. Everything the Steelers have said is that you're going to probably see Caleb Johnson, assuming that he just looks decent in training camp and stays healthy throughout the preseason, take on that Najee Harris role of probably 250 carries and probably catch around 30 balls or so. And if you combine that type of role with a lot of red zone usage and what we're hoping is a more improved offense with Aaron Rodgers behind there compared to the quarterbacks they had last year, and despite what you think of Aaron Rodgers, yeah, he's way better than the quarterbacks they had playing football last year. And I mentioned earlier that Arthur Smith, still the offensive coordinator here, this is going to work pretty well for Caleb Johnson because Arthur Smith loves feeding big running backs. We saw it for years with Derrick Henry. He gave him 378 carries in 2020 and over 2,000 yards. Heck, we even saw it in 2021 when he turned Cordell Patterson from a special teams wide receiver into a running back for the Atlanta Falcons. And as a part-time player, Cordell Patterson was a top 20 running back in fantasy. Mr. Arthur Smith, a big body himself, loves the big-bodied running backs. He loves these 220-plus pound running backs or converted running backs like Patterson, and I think we're going to see the same happen this year for one Caleb Johnson. Why? Because, I mean, Pittsburgh's done it in the past. We just saw Pittsburgh for 3 straight years ranked top 10 in rushing yards and rushing attempts per game. Last year alone, they averaged over 31 rushing attempts per game, the 4th highest in the NFL. We're also seeing a Pittsburgh offensive line that's improved over the last couple of years. Last year, they were banged up as well, but we're hoping that it can get healthier. They didn't really do much here at all. They lose Dan Moore, which is kind of surprising how much Dan Moore got, and James Daniel as well. So they lose some pieces on the offensive line, but the other key pieces are only going to be getting healthier and getting more experience. And as I mentioned, we're just hoping that Aaron Rodgers being there behind what should be at least average, and that's all you need for fantasy, average offensive line, can keep drives alive and can get them to the red zone, where Caleb Johnson, if he can just cash in a couple of touchdowns, if you're getting an 8-touchdown season out of Caleb Johnson, he's going to smash his current ADP. Now, it's still early. We're not even in training camp yet, but from rookie OTAs right here and minicamp as well, there's early Caleb Johnson buzz out of Steelers camp. Everything that they're talking about has been good. They're even saying that he's catching passes. You don't have to read all these articles, but they're saying that basically he looks like exactly what you expected, a big back, a guy who can break some long plays, catch passes surprisingly as well. He's already gotten the confidence from his own head coach. Mike Tomlin, Caleb Johnson's new head coach, ended up saying this is a high volume capable runner who was the center of his offense in college. A lot of Sunday-like runs that we saw out of him. They would go on to basically say like, yeah, I think that this could be a top 10 running back in the NFL. And they mentioned obviously Najee Harris not being there and just being kind of like their easy replacement. And again, when you look at the depth chart of what we're seeing here right now in Pittsburgh, who else is going to be replacing him, right? Like, look at this right now. Not Jaylen Warren, not Kenneth Gainwell, not Cordell Patterson, who I think's like 32, 33 years old, not Evan Hall, although I would have liked to see him get more work when the Colts drafted him. But again, obviously Jonathan Taylor was there. It's going to be Caleb Johnson. And I think there's a world where as a rookie, I'm not going to project him for 300 touches, probably closer to like 250, 260 touches. But there's a world where he sees 300 touches and you're getting him in the 6th or 7th round of your draft. Right now, according to DraftKings Sportsbook, you can see Caleb Johnson is projected to rush for about 800.5 total yards right now. That's pretty solid for a 6th or 7th round pick. He's projected for about 6 touchdowns. And by the way, this rushing total of 800.5 is higher than guys like Aaron Jones, David Montgomery, Alvin Kamara, another rookie in Quinshon Judkins. Yes, it's Caleb Johnson who is currently going after a lot of those names. Alvin Kamara right next to David Montgomery after Aaron Jones, yet he's projected to rush for more and have similar touchdowns. So where Caleb Johnson currently goes as the 75th, barely in the top 75 players, often a 7th round pick in fantasy drafts. Where he currently goes, yeah, give me him over Quinshon Judkins, who goes after him, over who goes before him, over DeAndre Swift, who goes before him. We can scroll up a ton here. I want him over David Montgomery, who goes before him. I'll take the rookie and Caleb Johnson in an arguably one of the best situations a rookie running back can land in Arthur Smith offense with Pittsburgh. Now, Caleb Johnson's going in the top 75 picks, but if you want to see exactly where I have the top 50 overall players ranked round by round, the best and worst values, you can check it out in my free top 50 rankings. It's linked down below, or you can just head to fantasyrankingsfree.com. That's fantasyrankingsfree.com. That will take you to this page right here where you simply just enter your email, and that allows me to send you the top 50 overall rankings. It'll be updated all summer, so you could use it to dominate those first 4 to 5 rounds of your draft. But if you're somebody who is very serious about fantasy and wants to smack around your friends every week of the year, well, you might be someone who wants to go a step deeper and get my full top 250 rankings, all my other draft tools, my in-season tools that I use in every single one of my leagues, and that's what the Fantasy Blueprint is all about. That's why I built it. Over 10,000 people used it last year to win their leagues. Over 10,000 people are currently using it this year. Might even be some people in your league. So if you want to check it out, it's at jointheblueprint.com. You can check it out right now. Those prices will be increasing August 1st. Jointheblueprint.com. The next running back I want to talk about, if you've watched this channel, you know I like Chase Brown this year, and assuming that he doesn't become like an early 2nd round pick, I'm going to continue to like Chase Brown where he currently sits as a 3rd round pick, because down the stretch last year, this guy was a league winner. Nothing has changed this offseason, and we're about to get into it. Literally nothing has changed this offseason. Knock on wood that this guy stays healthy to lead me to believe that he just won't do the same thing he did last year when he was a league winner. You've probably seen this stat before since I've been talking about it all summer, but in the second half of the season last year where Zach Moss goes down and they turn the keys all over to Chase Brown, the dude averaged 20.8 fantasy points per game compared to just 11 in his first 8 games. So he went from being a flex option maybe for you to a legit starting top 5 running back in fantasy. Between his receiving yards and rushing yards, he was averaging last year over 116 yards per game, almost 24 touches per game. The guy played 85% of the snaps, literally led the NFL ahead of Saquon Barkley in snap share the second half of the season, and during that stretch had at least 90 total yards in every game. He was like Christian McCaffrey light. And speaking of Christian McCaffrey light, like over a 17-game stretch, he would have had over 400 touches. That's some Christian McCaffrey type stuff. About 2,000 total yards, 81 catches would have led the NFL, and 13 touchdowns. That's his 17-game pace, what he was doing for the final 8 games of last year. Now, here's the crazy part. This is a really good Twitter account, Ryan Heath. You can check him out. He's talking about expected touchdowns versus actual touchdowns. What this basically means is, like, based on the situation you were in, where you got your carries, on average, who would have scored in that situation at like an average NFL running back, what you were expected to score, and what actually happened. Now, this is a very big chart of a bunch of fantasy relevant players, but basically the only thing you have to look at here is these players who are on the left side of the screen are due for positive touchdown regression. This little line down the screen right here, anybody on the left side basically should have had more touchdowns than they actually got, and Chase Brown is up and towards the top of this one. So Chase Brown was one of the most unlucky players in the NFL last year when it came to scoring touchdowns. Part of that might be because Jamar Chase was just catching so many touchdowns. Joe Burrow was throwing a lot of touchdowns. They're probably going to be skewed to pass or run the ball a little bit more this year in the red zone compared to last year for the Bengals, which is just crazy to think about because he was already dominant, a top 5 running back in the second half of last year, and that was while being unlucky from a touchdown standpoint. And we already know the guy has the receiving game role like nobody else in this backfield. Samaje Perine they added, we'll get into that. He's like an aging veteran. He can catch passes nowhere near as much as Chase Brown showed last year, where he ranked top 5 in receptions, where he had 360 receiving yards, and he didn't even get going as a full-time back until the second half of the year, and 3 receiving touchdowns again in just 9 games as a starter. Now, I mentioned Samaje Perine, and this is what the Bengals did this offseason. Not a lot overall, as you can see on the team changes tracker in the Fantasy Blueprint. Samaje Perine was added in free agency. They lost Khalil Herbert. I think that's like a 1-for-1 change in terms of these veteran running backs, right? Maybe they trust Samaje a little bit more in pass protection. Taj Brooks, a 6th-round running back, was added. So all offseason, we're concerned, like, okay, who are they going to add in free agency? Will Najee Harris land on this team? Will Aaron Jones leave the Vikings? Will J.K. Dobbins land on the Bengals, right? No. None of those things happen. Will any of the top running backs in the draft in the first 3 rounds? No, only a 6th-round running back. It's literally Chase Brown and just a bunch of dudes. Zach Moss, who might not even make the team. 30-plus-year-old Samaje, he's about to turn 30. 6th-round pick Taj Brooks, who's a worst version, in my opinion, of Chase Brown. And we just saw it last year. The Bengals are not afraid to feed one running back. They just did it last year with Chase Brown, and every single year before last year, do you remember remember this guy, Joe Mixon, one of the most consistent workloads we've ever seen for a running back in fantasy year in and year out when he was healthy. Look at this right here, 2023 when he's on the Bengals. The dude's seeing 250 carries, 212, 292 carries. Every single year he's getting a ton of usage as a runner, as a receiver. You're getting 50 plus catches every single year, 40 plus catches in a year where he was splitting the backfield, right? This is a dude for his final 2 or 3 years with the Bengals. Joe Mixon was a workhorse, and last year Chase Brown the second half of the year was a workhorse. They're going to give these guys the ball. Literally, Joe Mixon had 300 or more opportunities every single season he was healthy with the Bengals after that rookie year, and he always ranked top 10 in opportunity share in terms of his overall backfield targets and touches that he accounted for. So yeah, I think Chase Brown is in good hands going to another year with the Bengals, who still have Joe Burrow, who still have a bad defense, so they'll have to continue to throw to keep up in games, which only helps a pass catching running back. All the quotes right here from Coach Speak Index this offseason, everything has looked good so far for Chase Brown. You can see it. I mean, they just, everything that is here that is highlighted, I'll kind of zoom in on some of this. It's a good account. Everything's been good. I believe in Chase Brown. I think he's a top 10 back in the league. That's their GM. Chase Brown is a well-rounded skill set. He obviously contributed in the pass game for us a lot last year. Getting the backs involved to do in the pass game is something we intend to do again. That's their offensive coordinator. Like, there's just so much here that is trending well for Chase Brown. If you told me that they added J.K. Dobbins late in the year, maybe even a Nick Chubb, just any other running back, I would be a little bit concerned. I'm not concerned about Samaje Perine. Chase Brown is currently projected for nearly 900 rushing yards, which is pretty significant. Like, only about around 10 running backs are projected for these many rushing yards. So that's how the NFL and DraftKings Sportsbook is viewing him. That's also not even factoring in his 5.5 rushing touchdowns. Of course, there's going to be somewhere around 300 to 400 receiving yards that you can expect with a receiving touchdown or two. He's projecting out as like a second round running back who you get to take right now in the third round of your fantasy draft as a 29th overall player. I think he's one of the best third round picks, up there with like the Rashee Rices of the world. If Josh Jacobs falls into the third round, these are the guys that you want to be drafting. But there's another running back who's going even later. Maybe now he starts to go at the end of the fourth round, but even today, right now as we sit here, he's still going in the fifth round in plenty of drafts. And that man's name is the Carolina Panthers running back Chuba Hubbard. Just turned 26 years old. He's one of the most underrated workhorse, yes, workhorse running backs in fantasy football. And now let's dive into it. Last year alone, he was a top 13 running back in fantasy, averaging 16 points per game. Okay, let's just scroll down to the overall usage here, because everything for this guy was very good. He was top 10 in rushing yards per game. When you factor in his receiving yards, he had over 1,350 yards last year. He had 43 receptions, quietly 11 touchdowns. He was productive in almost every single department, averaging nearly 5 yards per carry. And it wasn't just the volume, because his efficiency and really his explosiveness was legitimately some of the best in the league. He ranked 5th in explosive run rate, 6th in yards after contact, and top 10 in PFF rushing grades. He was above guys like Jahmyr Gibbs in terms of yards after contact per attempt and just explosiveness. Yes, Jahmyr Gibbs, Chuba Hubbard was above in those categories. And you could dig into the usage metrics. I mean, this guy was one of the every down backs in the NFL. He ranked 3rd in running back snap share, top 5 in opportunity share as well. You look at his route participation in terms of what he was doing as a receiver, route participation, running a route on nearly 50% of his team's dropbacks. That was top 10. Top 10 in routes run, averaging 16 per game. Like, I get it. They added some backfield competition, and we're about to get into that. But Chuba Hubbard last year was the guy, and he proved himself in every single situation. So much so that from week 3 on, it was a couple of first 2 bad games of the year where Bryce Young was terrible and the offense overall was terrible. But from that point on, Chuba Hubbard was averaging over 18 fantasy points per game. During this stretch, he had 85 rushing yards per game, 12 receiving yards per game, so nearly 100 yards per game. The dude was averaging the 4th most carries during that stretch and was a top 10 running back. I mean, that's a good like bar trivia. Like, okay, who was a top 8? It was actually a top 8 running back last year. He was averaging nearly 100 yards per game, and they're going to list a bunch of guys. They're going to list Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, all these other guys, and they're going to end up being wrong until they get to Chuba Hubbard. And the Panthers noticed this. Your buddy at the bar might have not have, but the Panthers noticed this, and they gave him before the year even ended, which is pretty rare for running backs. We saw it with Alvin Kamara, but then we also saw it last year with Chuba Hubbard, a 4-year extension for $33 million. And $33 million, that's $8 million per year, a guaranteed signing bonus of about $12 million. That's not like a payment that you give a running back before the season ends, when you can just test the free agency market and a loaded draft class upcoming at the running back position. You don't give a back that type of money to be in a committee. So quite frankly, I really don't care that they added Rico Dowdle for like $2 or $3 million a year. I really don't care that they added Trevor Etienne in the 4th round of a draft. Yes, maybe he can catch some passes. And yes, Rico Dowdle for the Cowboys last year was really good, but they chose Javonte Williams over Rico Dowdle to bring back for basically the same price, which is surprising. I think Chuba Hubbard is just a level above these guys. Like, Chuba Hubbard is probably like a tier 2 running back in the NFL. I think Rico Dowdle at best is tier 3, probably tier 4. And Trevor Etienne, yeah, I mean, if he ends up balling out, sure, he's a rookie. We really don't know what to expect. But based on his profile, he probably looks like he's more so a pass catcher, maybe somewhat one-dimensional in the NFL. Now, if you're somebody who's like, yeah, but Chuba Hubbard got hurt at the end of the last year with a knee injury, he sure did. In week 16, he had a knee injury, but it was week 16, and this team wasn't making the playoffs, and they decided to just shut him down and not force him back for week 17 or 18. They said his injury was like a 2-week recovery timeline, so they said, let's just shut him down. No need to force him back. This year's over. And to ease your mind even more, he's already back. He was back in OTAs. He was back in minicamp. The defense was saying he was like their biggest headache, that he looked awesome out there. So, and there's no concerns about the injury right now, knock on wood, that another one doesn't occur in training camp. So I like Chuba Hubbard a lot this year. I mean, the overall offensive environment looks like it's going to take a step forward, assuming Bryce Young can continue to look good in another year with Dave Canales. If we look at what they did this offseason, this was already a very improved offensive line from last year. All they did in the NFL draft was add weapons. We talked about Trevor Etienne. They added a late round wide receiver and tight end. Obviously, their first round pick, top 10 overall pick, maybe the best wide receiver in the draft up there with Travis Hunter, and Tet McMillan gets drafted. So the offense looks like it's getting better. They have the same cohesiveness in Dave Canales for the second year, which actually gives them something to grow off of from last year. And here's something that's really interesting. I put this tweet out. I don't think many people notice this. I said, believe it or not, sportsbooks have Chuba Hubbard projected for more rushing yards this year than, and look at this insane list. I mean, this is crazy. More rushing yards than Christian McCaffrey, Kenneth Walker, Chase Brown, Aaron Jones, James Cook, Joe Mixon. I mean, half of these names, probably all of them, I wouldn't expect Chuba Hubbard to be projected for more rushing yards than, but he's projected for more rushing yards, and for some of those running backs, more touchdowns than them, but he goes basically behind almost all of them in fantasy drafts. Hubbard right now you can get as the 53rd overall pick in fantasy drafts. This means that he's a 5th round pick right now. Sometimes he falls into the 4th round if you're playing with some people who maybe watch my videos or are really into fantasy football, but as a 5th round pick, you're not going to find a lot better, if any better, running backs in this range. Now let's get to a running back who the theme of this video, like betting my house on these players, there's probably not a guy that you would want to bet your house more on than this player the last 5 years. And if you guessed Derrick Henry, you are absolutely correct, because all Derrick Henry does is go out there and produce. That's why he got the name King Henry. And even though you can see right here, he's 31 and a half, funny to call a 31-year-old 31 and a half, but 31 and a half years old, you might be freaking out about that. You shouldn't, because Derrick Henry, as a 30 and a half year old last year, was a top 5 running back in fantasy, putting up arguably probably his second best season, but arguably the best season of his career, where he had over 1,900 rushing yards, an insane 325 carries. We got to finally see Derrick Henry in a Lamar Jackson Ravens run-first offense, and everything you could possibly dream of, him scoring a lot of touchdowns, deception with Lamar Jackson, the offense looking amazing, all that happened. I mean, you name it, he was up there besides only Saquon Barkley. Like, you're talking about carries, you're talking about rush attempts, you're talking about rushing touchdowns, all those things, rushing yards. He's right there as number 2 in the league behind Saquon or Jahmyr Gibbs in terms of touchdowns. And even though he was 30 years old, turning 31, it was arguably his most efficient year. He was second in the NFL in 10-plus yard runs. He was first in explosive runs. He led the NFL in yards after contact, and this dude was averaging over 6 yards per touch and 5.3 yards per carry efficiency. He's also extremely consistent. Of course, this can drop off a cliff at any point, especially when you're in your 30s, but we saw no signs last year. 325 carries, 280. Oh, 280 in 2023 was a down year competing with rookie Tajay Spears, right? 349. Then he gets hurt. His other healthy seasons, 378, 303. It's pretty crazy that this guy can just continuously go out there, have over 300 carries, have over 1,500 yards, average 5 yards per carry, probably score 10-plus touchdowns in any season where he remains healthy. And the most beautiful thing about this is he's just going to run it back again this year. He's still on the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson is still an MVP caliber and MVP actual quarterback. There's no competition here for him. This is the same Ravens team that last year led the NFL in rushing yards, that ranked 2nd overall in rushing attempts. You can scroll over. Their efficiency in terms of yards per carry led the NFL. Yards per game led the NFL. Rushing touchdowns, top 5 in the NFL. Like, yes, obviously we know the Ravens with Lamar Jackson and especially Derrick Henry for the 2024 season, they were a run-heavy team, but why is that going to change? All the same dudes in terms of the coaches are there. All the same dudes in terms of the personnel that matter are there. And when Lamar Jackson is your quarterback, it's the ultimate cheat code like we saw last year for a running back. It's going to keep the defenses guessing. It widens your running lanes as well. And we just saw last year Derrick Henry average over 6 yards per touch getting to play next to Lamar. And let's just look at all the other context here. Like, the only thing you can point to is that this guy's getting older, because everything else dating back to last year's efficiency and production and this year's situation basically looks like it should be the same for him barring any injury. You're looking at Justice Hill being his biggest competition. Okay, he already was last year. In games when the Ravens get down and they're trailing by multiple scores in the second half, which isn't often, sure, Justice Hill will come on the field and catch 2 or 3 balls. But besides that, there's nobody else here that's going to be new or threatening. You scroll down to this offensive line, it still should be one of the better offensive lines in the league. They have Ronnie Stanley, right? They're going to have Tyler Linderbaum. This is a good offensive line, and at worst, if it's average, that's fine. That's all you need at this point. And this is where things get fun. Right now, the sportsbook books have a 31.5-year-old. Oh my God, he's 31. Derrick Henry for nearly 1,400 rushing yards, not even factoring in the 100 or 200 receiving yards he'll get. 1,400 rushing yards. They also have this dude projected for 13.5 rushing touchdowns. You're not going to find a line like that maybe ever again in the history of the NFL. 13.5 rushing touchdowns and nearly 1,400 rushing yards, not even factoring in his receiving totals for receptions and receiving yards. This alone is enough to spend a second-round pick and for you to bet your house on him. Again, we're going to put the contingency that I don't lose my house if the guy gets injured. If he stays healthy, you're getting 1,400 yards. You're probably getting 12, 13, 14 touchdowns. So you want to talk about just value and how you feel good. If you have a late-round pick this year, I think it's an awesome spot to be. Maybe you double up at running back with Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry and then basically don't touch the position like until ever again, maybe like the 10th or 11th round. Maybe you say, I'll take a Nico Collins, potential to be the #1 overall receiver, and Derrick Henry, who I feel good about 1,400 total yards or 1,400 rushing yards and a dozen touchdowns, right? That's a good spot to be in. Derrick Henry, you don't have to pay a first-round pick for him. I think he looks very good this year. So these are 5 running backs that I'm betting my house on this year. We're not signing no documents on that, but I'm betting my house. That's how confident I feel on them. At least I'll say that. Basically, you just don't want to let your league mates draft these guys before you can. If you can just land a couple of them, maybe all 5 of them, but just a couple of these guys, you're in a good spot. And if you can combine the running backs in this video with the 5 wide receivers popping up in this video, you're drafting the wrong wide receivers, take these 5 instead, you're going to be in a really good spot with your fantasy drafts this year. You can check that one out right here, and I'll see you all in the next one.